2 a.m. in Chicago sounds like wind pressing against glass, but tonight it sounded like a death sentence. I woke up to a whisper coming from the balcony. My husband, Tyler. He wasn't talking to a mistress. He was talking to a lawyer. I heard 3 phrases that froze my blood. Mental incapacity clause, emergency conservatorship, Friday. He wasn't planning to leave me. He was planning to erase me. To seize control of my company 3 days before our IPO. Panic tried to surge through me, a system error threatening to crash the whole network. I isolated it. I didn't scream. I lay back down and let my heart rate slow to a rhythmic, lethal beat. If he wanted a war, I would give him an apocalypse. Have you ever felt a sudden, cold realization that the person closest to you was wearing a mask? Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to know who is standing with me in this community. I waited 17 minutes for his breathing to deepen into the heavy rhythm of deep sleep. Then I slid out of bed, my bare feet silent on the polished concrete floors. I didn't go to the kitchen for water. I went straight to my home office, a glass-walled command center, overlooking the dark expanse of Lake Michigan. This was where I built my empire. This was where I would save it. I sat in my ergonomic chair and opened my laptop. The screen glow illuminated the room with a harsh blue light. Guessing Tyler's password didn't require an algorithm. He was arrogant, the kind of man who believes he is the smartest person in the room simply because he is the loudest. He used the date we met. Sentimental, lazy. I logged into his cloud backup and started digging. It didn't take long. He hadn't even bothered to encrypt it. He had a folder labeled transition. Inside, I found the architecture of my own destruction. Drafts of legal filings, emails with a psychiatrist I had never met, outlining a diagnosis of acute stress-induced psychosis. A timeline for an emergency conservatorship hearing scheduled for Friday morning, 3 hours before the markets open for our IPO. He wasn't just going to divorce me. He was going to have me declared legally incompetent, seize my voting rights, and liquidate my pre-IPO shares under the guise of protecting my assets. I stared at the documents, the pixels burning into my retinas, and then the shock stabilized into clinical detachment. I asked myself the question that everyone asks in the wake of a catastrophe. How did I not see this coming? I am a woman who built a $600 million company on pattern recognition. I spot market trends before they happen. I find bugs in code that seasoned engineers miss. How did I miss the monster sleeping in my bed? It wasn't stupidity, it was cognitive dissonance. That is the blind spot of the brilliant. When your brain is presented with 2 conflicting realities, the loving husband who makes you coffee and the predator who is systematically isolating you, it chooses the one that ensures survival. It deletes the error messages. It overrides the red flags to preserve the narrative of the perfect life you have worked so hard to build. I looked back at the last year of my life through this new, cold lens. The signs were there. They were everywhere. The way he would gently take financial documents out of my hands, saying, "You are too stressed to deal with this, Sid. Let me handle the boring stuff." I thought it was an act of service. It was a data breach. The way he would whisper to our friends at dinner parties that I was working too hard and acting a little erratic lately. I thought he was concerned. He wasn't. He was planting seeds. He was building a witness list. He had been gaslighting me, not to make me crazy, but to build a legal case that I was crazy. He had weaponized my ambition against me, turning my focus into a symptom of instability. I sat there in the dark, and I let the realization wash over me. I wasn't a fool for trusting him. I was human. But the human part of me, the wife who believed in partnership and vulnerability, died in that chair. I closed the folder. I didn't print anything. I didn't leave a digital footprint. I simply memorized the timeline. Friday, 9 a.m. That was his deadline. That was when he planned to walk into a courtroom and strip me of my autonomy. That gave me exactly 72 hours. He thought he was playing chess with a wife who was too emotional to see the board. He was about to find out he was playing against a CEO who specialized in hostile takeovers. I checked the time. 3:14 a.m. I had work to do. I sat there in the silence of my home office, and for the first time, I let myself look at the cage I had helped him build. It wasn't made of iron bars. It was made of backhanded compliments and strategic insecurities. I remembered the night I closed my Series B funding. I came home buzzing with adrenaline, ready to celebrate. Tyler had opened a bottle of wine, poured 2 glasses, and said, "You are so lucky you have me, Sid." Most men would be intimidated by a woman who works this much. But I love you anyway. I love you anyway. That was the hook. That was the invisible chain. For 5 years, he had framed my ambition as a flaw and his tolerance as a virtue. He made me feel like a liability he was graciously managing, rather than the asset that funded his entire lifestyle. I looked around the room at the awards on the shelves, the patents framed on the walls. I wasn't the liability. I was the bank. And he was just a bad investment I had held onto for too long. I didn't let the anger consume me. I funneled it. I needed an extraction team. I picked up my phone and opened an encrypted messaging app. There was only one person I trusted with a nuclear option. Olivia, we had met in grad school. While I was building algorithms, she was deconstructing corporate fraud. Now, she was the most feared forensic, accountant, and corporate lawyer in Chicago. I typed 3 words, code red, diner. She didn't ask why, she didn't ask when. She replied with a location and a time, the Pancake House on Wacker, 40 minutes. I showered in the guest bathroom, dressed in a nondescript tracksuit, and left the penthouse via the service elevator. I wasn't Sydney the CEO, I was a ghost. When I slid into the booth opposite Olivia, she was already reviewing a file on her tablet, a black coffee steaming in front of her. She didn't hug me. She looked at my face, saw the lack of sleep and the cold resolve in my eyes, and simply said, "How bad is it?" I didn't speak. I slid my laptop across the table and opened the transition folder. I watched her eyes scan the legal drafts, the psychiatric emails, the timeline. Her expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. After 5 minutes, she closed the laptop and looked at me. "He is trying to execute a hostile takeover of your life, Sydney, and he has done his homework. The mental incapacity angle is smart. Evil, but smart. It bypasses the prenup." "I know," I said, my voice steady. "I have until Friday morning. I need to move everything. The liquid capital, the real estate titles, the pre-IPO shares, all of it." Olivia pulled a legal pad from her bag. "We are talking about $600 million in mixed assets. Moving that kind of volume in 72 hours without tripping anti-money laundering algorithms or alerting him via joint notifications is impossible for a standard lawyer." She uncapped her pen. "Good thing I am not a standard lawyer." She started sketching a diagram. It looked like a map of a war zone. "We can't just transfer it. We have to encumber it. We create an irrevocable trust in the Cook Islands. We sell your shares to the trust in exchange for a promissory note. The assets leave your name legally, but you retain control as the protector of the trust. By Friday morning, on paper, you will be destitute. If he tries to seize your assets, he will be grabbing a handful of smoke." "What about the notifications?" I asked. "He gets an alert for any transaction over $50,000. Olivia smiled, and it was the sharpest, most dangerous thing I had ever seen. "We don't do one big transfer. We do thousands of microtransactions through a shell vendor that mirrors his own venture capital flows. We hide the exodus inside the noise. But, Sydney, once we start this, there is no going back. This is financial warfare. If we miss one signature, if we leave one digital footprint, he wins." I thought about the man sleeping in my bed, the man who whispered promises while drafting my demise. "He already declared war, Olivia. I am just finishing it." "Okay," she said, ripping the page off the pad. "Finish your coffee. We have an empire to steal." The next 72 hours were a blur of calculated deception. I became a double agent in my own marriage. By day, I was the dutiful, stressed wife Tyler expected me to be. I cooked his favorite risotto. I asked him about his day, listening to him brag about a big deal he was closing on Friday. I nodded and smiled, while in my head, I was tracking the migration of $600 million across international borders. Every time he left the room, I was on my encrypted phone with Olivia. "Real estate holdings are transferred," she would text. "Liquid assets are currently being routed through Singapore." We hit a snag with the bond portfolio, but I rerouted it. "We are on schedule." I lived in a state of hypervigilance. Every time Tyler looked at his phone, my heart stopped. Had he seen a notification? Had a bank called him? But he remained oblivious, wrapped in the arrogance of a man who believes he has already won. Wednesday night, he came into the kitchen while I was doing dishes. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You seem tense, babe," he murmured. "You know, after Friday, everything is going to change. I'm going to take care of everything. You won't have to worry about a single decision anymore." The double meaning was so loud it was deafening. He wasn't promising relief. He was promising captivity. I forced my body to relax against him. "That sounds nice," I lied. "I am just tired." "This IPO is a lot." "I know," he said, kissing my neck. "Soon, it will be over." Thursday was the gauntlet. The final transfers were the largest and the riskiest. I sat in my office at the company, staring at my screens, watching the progress bars. My assistant, oblivious to the war I was fighting, kept bringing me coffee and updated schedules. At 2 p.m., Tyler texted me, "Meeting with the lawyers ran late. Dinner at 8? Meeting with the lawyers?" He was finalizing the conservatorship paperwork. He was dotting the I's on my erasure. "Sounds perfect," I replied. "See you at home." At 4:45 p.m., Olivia sent the signal, a single green checkmark emoji. It was done. The trust was sealed. The assets were gone. On paper, Sydney, the CEO, was worth nothing. The entity that owned my company, my home, and my future was now a ghost in the Cook Islands, and I held the only key. I drove home with a strange calm settling over me. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard anticipation. I walked into the penthouse and saw Tyler pouring himself a scotch. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the predator behind the mask. He smiled. "Hey, beautiful. Ready for the big day tomorrow?" "Ready," I said. "More than you know." Friday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The sun reflected off the lake, filling the penthouse with a bright, sterile light. I was already dressed sharp, blazer, tailored trousers, armor. I sat at the head of the dining table, a cup of coffee untouched in front of me. At 8:15 a.m., Tyler walked in. He wasn't wearing his usual gym clothes. He was in a suit. Dark navy, expensive, serious. He held a manila folder in his hand. He sat down opposite me, placing the folder on the glass table. He didn't pour coffee. He folded his hands and gave me a look of practiced, sorrowful concern. "Sydney," he began, his voice low and somber, "we need to talk. I have been worried about you. We all have." I watched him perform. It was flawless. The furrowed brow, the gentle tone. "Worried about what, Tyler?" I asked, my voice flat. "Your stress levels, your erratic behavior. I have been speaking with some specialists." He slid the folder across the table. "I think you need help, Sid. Real help. And until you are better, I am going to step in. I am going to take the burden off your shoulders." I didn't open the folder. I knew what was inside. The petition for emergency conservatorship. The affidavits from the doctor I had never met. The transfer of power. I looked him in the eye. "You aren't taking a burden, Tyler. You are taking my company." His expression hardened slightly, but he kept up the act. "This is for your own good. You are not thinking clearly. If you sign this voluntarily, we can keep it quiet. We can protect your reputation before the IPO." "My reputation is fine," I said, "and my assets are safe." "Your assets are at risk because you are at risk," he snapped, losing patience. "Don't make this ugly, Sydney. Sign the papers." I leaned forward. "I can't sign them, Tyler, because there is nothing to sign over." He blinked. "What?" "I moved it," I said. "The cash, the portfolio, the real estate, the shares, all of it. It is gone." He laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "You can't move $600 million without me knowing. I get alerts." "You get alerts for the joint accounts," I corrected. "You don't get alerts for the offshore trust I established 72 hours ago. You don't get alerts for the sale of my pre-IPO shares to a holding company you can't touch. Check your phone, Tyler. Check the main account." He stared at me, the blood draining from his face. He pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling as he opened the banking app. I watched his eyes widen. I watched the arrogant smirk dissolve into pure, unadulterated panic. The balance was 0. "Where is it?" he whispered, looking up at me. "Where is the money?" "It is in a place where your mental incapacity clause doesn't apply," I said. "It is in a place where you will never, ever find it." He stood up, knocking his chair over. "You embezzled it! You stole marital assets! I will have you arrested!" "I didn't steal anything," I said, standing up to meet him. "I protected my property from a hostile takeover. And you can try to sue me, Tyler. but you can't pay a lawyer with a zero balance. He lunged for the folder, but I put my hand on it. And one more thing, I said, get out of my house. He looked around the room, at the life he thought he owned, and realized he was just a guest who had overstayed his welcome. The predator had become the prey, and he didn't even know how the trap had been sprung. Tyler didn't just leave, he exploded. He stormed out of the penthouse, shouting threats about fraud, embezzlement, and destroying me. Within an hour, my phone began to buzz. Not with calls from him, but from board members. Sydney, Tyler just called. He is saying, you are having a breakdown? He says you emptied the corporate accounts. He was trying to burn the house down on his way out. He was launching the smear campaign he had prepared as a backup plan. I didn't panic. I had anticipated this. I sent a mass email to the board, attaching the affidavit from my own doctor obtained quietly 2 days prior, certifying my perfect mental health. I also attached a summary of the forensic audit Olivia had run on his accounts. But Tyler wasn't done. He was desperate. And desperation makes smart people do stupid things. At 3 p.m., my phone pinged with a security alert. Someone was trying to access the rainy day account. This was the trap, the secondary twist. When Olivia and I moved the assets, we left one account visible. It looked like a hidden offshore slush fund, labeled with a code name Tyler would recognize. It contained a small but significant sum enough to tempt him, enough to make him think he had found my escape stash. We knew that if he was backed into a corner, he would try to seize it. He would try to steal what he thought was my dirty money to fund his legal war. I watched the log in real time. He bypassed the two-factor authentication using a cloned SIM card, a trick he must have set up weeks ago. He initiated a transfer. He thought he was robbing me. He wasn't. The moment he authorized that transfer, he triggered a digital tripwire. The account wasn't just a honeypot. It was a confession booth. By accessing it with his credentials and moving the funds to an account he controlled, he wasn't just stealing from his wife, he was stealing from a federally monitored entity. The account was tagged by the SEC as part of an ongoing investigation into his previous offshore dealings Olivia had uncovered during her audit. He had just digitally fingerprinted himself onto a federal crime scene. The transfer didn't go to his account. It went straight to a holding account managed by the Department of Justice. My phone rang. It was Olivia. He took the bait, Sydney. The SEC just flagged the transaction. They have his IP, his device ID, and the transfer authorization. He just handed them the smoking gun for his own embezzlement scheme. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Tyler had spent months planning to frame me as incompetent. In the end, his own greed was the only evidence they needed to prove he was a criminal. He had tried to break into my fortress, only to find out he had locked himself in a prison cell. The fallout was swift and absolute. By Monday morning, Tyler wasn't just unemployed, he was radioactive. The news of his arrest for securities fraud broke before the markets opened. He was walked out of his firm in handcuffs, his face plastered across the financial news tickers not as the rising star he claimed to be, but as the desperate fraudster he really was. I watched it all from my office. The glass walls, no longer feeling like exposure, but like a vantage point. The board, once jittery with his rumors, now looked at me with renewed reverence. I hadn't just survived a hostile takeover, I had dismantled it with surgical precision. The IPO launched on schedule. The stock soared. My name wasn't associated with scandal, it was associated with strength. But the victory wasn't just about the company, it was about what came next. I didn't want to just be the woman who outsmarted her husband. I wanted to be the woman who ensured no other woman would have to fight alone. Using a portion of the assets I had protected, I established the Phoenix Fund. It wasn't a charity, it was a war chest. Its mission was simple. Provide top-tier legal and forensic financial support to women facing coercive control and financial abuse. I hired Olivia as the lead counsel. We weren't just giving advice, we were giving weapons. We were giving women the tools to build their own fortresses. Standing in my office, looking out at the city skyline, I thought about the justice of the sower. Tyler had tried to bury me, thinking I was a seed that would rot in the dark. He didn't realize that being buried is exactly how you grow. He had tried to salt the earth of my life to make sure nothing would ever thrive there again. Instead, I had built a garden on the ruins of his ambition. I wasn't just a survivor, I was a builder. And every woman who walked through the doors of the Phoenix Fund, every asset recovered, every life reclaimed, was a testament to that. Revenge isn't just about destroying the enemy. It's about creating a world where they can no longer exist. It's about taking the power they tried to steal and planting it over and over again until a forest grows where there was once only a cage. If this story reminded you of your own strength, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's remind every woman that she has the power to own her sky. You are not alone.